Threads of Fate is a very interesting game that came out back in 1999 by Squaresoft on the original PlayStation. It was published in the US under Square Electronic Arts, which was a short-lived partnership between Square and EA to help release EA games over in Japan and Squaresoft titles in the West. Thankfully, this collaboration was short-lived and ended during the Enix merger. Getting into the game itself, Threads of Fate is an action RPG with it playing very similar to the Yi series. Gameplay will have you attacking enemies in real time as you make yourself through these linear point A to B style levels. The game opens up with you being given the option to play between the stories of our two protagonists. We have Ru, who is an amnesiac and is your more conventional JRPG protagonist in both story and design. Our other option is Mint, whose story I chose in my playthrough. Trust me, you'll know why later on. She's almost on the line of parody when it comes to a character in these kinds of games, and is the opposite to Ru in almost every way. Starting off with the narrative, we have a day in the life of Princess Mint. She's very spoiled, indulging in the life of luxury, until suddenly her sister Maya, using a relic, confronts her on her lifestyle, and after an act of humiliation involving pumpkins, Mint is banished from her empire, with her sister taking her role as the next in line for the throne. We then cut 2 years later, and Mint swears that she'll find one of these relics her sister used in order to get the upper hand in an attempt for world domination of all things, and it's here where the game opens up and we're given control for the first time. We arrive after some more boat shenanigans in the peaceful village of Corona. This is the main hub of the game, and it will be where you will return after finishing a level to heal up and buy upgrades. The actual gameplay of Threads of Fate will have you platforming in these short and sweet levels, which will result in these boss fights at the end of each one. Combat itself is fairly simplistic. There's no fast-paced dodges or even a block command, so you have to get creative in how you avoid attacks due to the lack of defensive options. Jumping mainly felt most effective in dodging moves because of this. Mint herself is a mage, and throughout the game as you progress you'll unlock these different spells that are mainly elemental based. Some of them have a pretty slow amount of startup and aren't worth using because of the trade-off in damage compared to time spent casting the move. I would say from my experience, if you truly want to shred through bosses and enemies, then surprisingly, Mint's kick is her most effective method of attack. It comes out way quicker than her other moves, deals more damage, and can even stun certain enemies and bosses. Falcon kick! You will want to use magic when in range fights, but outside of these instances, use Mint's kick is better all around in most cases and is very satisfying to use. Attacking enemies also grants MP similar to Kingdom Hearts, which further incentivizes playing offensively. Moving back into the story, we accidentally saved this girl from these bandits in an original act of revenge from what they did to Mint earlier on in the story. Mint will typically do things of her own accord as she sees fit, which usually results in her unintentionally helping someone out, which can make for some humorous moments like in this instance. It turns out that the girl's name is Elena, and she introduces you to her father, and it's here where the general plot structure of this game is formed. You'll be exploring these locations that lead to some hints as to where the relic is located. Elena's father, Klaus, is a researcher and will give you leads on each level, taking you to a new location which will result in you discovering these artifacts. Each time you finish a stage, you'll return to Klaus and be given information on the origins and creation of the infamous relic Mint is after. Throughout these expeditions, you'll be stopped by Mint's sister and her subjects, which will result in a boss fight since they are trying to prevent Mint from gaining world domination with this relic. After finding the entrance, the only way to open the seal is by constructing this prima doll character, which will further task you with finding items to give him the ability to open up the locked door, which is something only he can do. But Min isn't alone in her wanting for the relic. The other protagonist, Ru, wants it to revive a dead friend, and the villains are also after it for their own desires. The relic itself, which is later revealed to be called the Dew Prism, which is this game's Japanese title, is pretty much like the Triforce in the Zelda series. It's a coveted item crafted by this ancient civilization with the ability to grant anything. The director of Threads of Fate, Tsukimoto, had previously developed Xenogears, and after that game wanted to make something more lighthearted. I can definitely understand his reasoning. Xenogears really didn't pull any punches when it came to covering sensitive subject matters, and the game itself was very serious in tone. The team's roots in amazing JRPGs and desire to make something different at the time really adds to this game's overall quality. Threads of Fate has a very light-hearted vibe, and as a result of this really stands out when you consider how serious in tone Squaresoft's titles were on the original PlayStation during this time. Games like Parasite Eve, Final Fantasy VIII in particular, and the previously mentioned Xenogears really felt like the genre was moving towards more serious and mature themes, both visually and writing wise. Maybe back in the late 90s, among these more mature titles, it failed to make any waves in the public eye due to the standard being made, which was a trend gaming and pop culture was beginning to head towards. But looking at this game now through the lens of the modern day, I feel like it's as good as any other Squaresoft title from this era. No more evident is this fact than with the game's main star, Mint. Now, this is going to be hard to word, but Mint really is where this game shines most. She's the star of the show in every scene. Her personality is unlike any protagonist I've ever seen, and I think without her, this game would have fallen flat and made it nowhere near as memorable as it is. Liking Mint can be make or break for this game's enjoyment value in my opinion. She's selfish, rude, and struggles to empathize with others, but it really makes for some funny moments. You'd think her original motive for world domination changes through character development in the later hours of this game, but nope, she's literally a villain and she's out here just wanting to live her best life through any means necessary. She never falters in her conviction either, no matter how strong the opponent is. In some cases, being a literal dragon, she will still stand up for herself. A good example of where her personality shines is with Primo Doll, whose purpose is to only lift a seal to the Relic, and as a result of this realization, it starts getting existential about its existence, but Mint just puts it in its place, turning how their life is much more because of this dread that it feels. There are other moments throughout the game like this, and even though a lot of the scenes are at her expense due to her arrogance, the writers still knew how to make Mint not feel one note, which is an easy trap to fall into when designing these kinds of characters. Funnily enough, Mint at times reminded me of two other protagonists. The first I could compare her to in some moments is with Estelle from the Trails in the Sky games. They both have moments of arrogance and look visually alike, but once again, Mint is a literal villain, whereas Estelle wants to become a bracer and help people. This next comparison is a bit out there, but another character she reminded me a lot of is Sonic of all things. Similar to the classic games, Mint is someone always looking forward and moving on from any instance. This shows in moments where she's waiting on the player, like in the game over screen, which really reminded me of Sonic's idle animation in the 2D games, literally telling the player to hurry up. The way she interacts with villains also reminded me of Sonic, with her constant comebacks and one-liners. One last example of this game's writing being amazing, there's this scene that really resonated with me personally during my playthrough, which is completely optional. During one night, you talk with this camper called Rod who's helped you throughout the adventure. By the campfire, Rod tells Mint how she's young and will probably encounter moments in life where she'll want to give up. He talks about how he began making weapons and how at the start he was awful and couldn't make a thing. His wife kept pushing him though, reminding Rod not to give up on his dream. He mentions how he keeps failing at this vision but refuses to give up despite this so that he can return to her having achieved this dream. Then at the end, reminds Mint to keep a strong heart, all while she in typical Mint fashion never wavers in her original vision. It's nothing too deep, but it hit a chord for me personally, especially in terms of making this channel. Just being reminded that there's going to be successes and failures with any ambition really resonated with me. You could spend ages pondering over these feelings, or you can just keep moving forward, and in the end, Rod tells Mint to remember to slow down every now and then. But in all honesty, in Mint's case, she's just going full speed ahead with no brakes. One aspect of Japanese media I've grown to really appreciate in my adult years is how they always push for stories where having faith and believing in yourself is so important to get through anything. It might be cringe to some and is constantly memed on online with people oversimplifying JRPGs as having some power of friendship nonsense to defeat God, but it really is more than that. I remember when I was a teenager dropping games like Kingdom Hearts and Xenoblade 2 because of these themes, but growing older I feel like we need more light-hearted stories now than ever before. It's just crazy to me how growing older I find myself preferring more light-hearted games that aren't afraid to be themselves than when I was younger. This scene never gets brought back again and is kinda just there for some optional conversation, but that just makes it stand out to me all the more. You can tell this was made by some of the members behind Xenogears from moments like this. Sorry for the brief tangent, I just wanted to shed some light on a much smaller aspect of this already overlooked game. Moving forward, another aspect for this game I wanted to mention is its art style. For a PlayStation 1 title, the visuals and attention to detail that's on offer here is very impressive looking on a technical level for its time. Threads of Fate back in 1999 managed to have clothing and hair physics. This is genuine witchcraft, especially when you consider giants in the industry like FromSoft only being able to implement this for the first time in Dark Souls 2 back in 2014. The lighting and environments all have this low poly look that's aged incredibly well and just looks charming when looking at the game today. There are even sections in areas that aren't as busy where the main character will cast their own shadow. It even reacts accurately to the lighting when you move. I'm no tech guru, but I can't believe I'm seeing this achieved on an original PlayStation of all things. Also, character models blink and in some instances even move their pupils. They might not get to be very expressive due to the technical limitations, but these visual gags and small animations really convey a lot and make cutscenes visually really interesting. Mint herself is a good example of this. She'll often just dive kick someone as an introduction and is typically animated in this very exaggerated way to show her personality. I said it before and I'll say it again, this game's enjoyment weighs heavily on whether or not you like Mint. She's a very unconventional protagonist, even message boards back in the day debated on this. One last point on the finer details would be the music. It's done very well and feels just like the visuals in making this game feel lighthearted but genuine, and overall complements the vibe this game's going for. Similar to my Mischief Makers video, Threads of Fate has a very innovative life system for its time. Upon a death, you'll be given options on how you'll want to revive. The quality of these medals you collect will increase the amount of MP you revive with. This game is never too difficult, being mostly designed for beginners, but if you feel confident enough, you can sell these medals and essentially exchange lives for money. This trade-off is surprisingly ahead of its time, allowing you to buy better equipment in exchange for a less forgiving life system, which is a very interesting decision the player is allowed to make to somewhat increase the risk and netting upgrades in the process. A few negatives I have on this game personally is whilst I enjoy this variety in gameplay, some of the platforming sections in particular felt very slippery, with the collision on edges having strange geometry and making for some frustrating moments. Another complaint I have, and whilst it didn't feel like too much or bother me, I feel like it's a deal breaker for some, and that is with the amount of backtracking that's present here. This game also has a lot of cutscenes, which whilst I enjoyed, a lot of it felt more on pace with a 20 to 30 hour JRPG and not a short and sweet 12-hour action RPG, so sometimes the pacing in between levels felt kind of unbalanced between gameplay and dialogue moments. Sadly, the legacy of Threads of Fate isn't great. Square Enix only ever re-released the game once, with it never being officially distributed in Europe. The game's lead director, Sugimoto, did pitch a sequel back in 2004 for the PlayStation 2, but Square Enix turned down this proposal. This is especially sad when you consider the ending of this game has Mint tell Rue that she can't wait to find more relics and go on another adventure, showing that the developers had further plans in mind for this cast. Personally, I'd love to see more from this series, but I can't see it happening anytime soon. It really stood out as something more lighthearted and comedic in a sea of more mature titles, which the early 3D era of gaming was starting to steer towards. Also, once again, the second-hand market for this game really isn't doing it any favours. Have you ever played or heard of Threads of Fate? I'm curious. Also, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thanks for watching and have a nice rest of your day.